Hi, and welcome to today's Books Alive online event with Shilo Kino, author of the Pōrangi Boy, and Kristy from the Aotea School Library. The Porangi Boy is a finalist in the New Zealand Book Awards for children and young adults in the young adult fiction category. Thank you to the New Zealand Library's partnership program for the opportunity to host these events this week and next. Kristy and Shilo and the group, whenever you're ready.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Good afternoon. It's so good to see you.
So good to be here. How's everyone?
So I'm joined today with one of my colleagues as well in the library and some of our keen writing students as well. Keen to hear about your journey, about your story.
Oh, awesome. What are your names?
I'm Karina. I'm Joy. We are twins.
Oh, twins.
And I'm Kathy.
Oh, Kathy and Kristy. Oh, nice to meet you. Oh, I'm Shilo, obviously. So I'm happy to be here.
So tell us a bit about how you got started. So you're a journalist for a background as well. And have you always wanted to write fiction?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because this year I'm actually studying full-time Māori, and so I'm a student now, and so I haven't written at all this year really. So it's strange going back into like a writing space from being at school, like every day learning Māori, and then coming back into this space. I'm like, oh, but yeah, I've always wanted to be a writer since I was little, and I'm sure both of you know, I loved reading. I can imagine it's probably you guys love reading as well, right? And so if you love reading, then, there's usually books that you want to find, but you can't find them, like you wish there was a story, right? That was out there, but you can't find that story. And so if you can't find that story, then you need to go and write that story. And so there are lots of stories that I wanted to read growing up that were never available. And a lot of that reason is because I am Māori, and there weren't many Māori writers growing up and so for a lot of the stories that I was reading, I couldn't really relate to a lot of them. And so I guess, when I became an adult, I became a journalist, and I started writing on the side, and I started writing the Pōrangi Boy, and that was inspired by a protest that happened up north in Ngāwha, which is, I'm from Northland, not from Ngāwha, but near there, and the community up there protested against the prison being built. And I didn't really understand the story then, but as I became more aware, I realized that what the media had portrayed about the protest wasn't actually what had truly happened. So I really was inspired to write from the point of view of a young boy who was in the middle of the protest, and because I imagined what it was like for a kid being amongst all that, not really understanding what's going on, but ending up leading it. So yeah, that was inspiration behind the Porangi Boy.
So there's an element of true story in there then?
Oh yeah, definitely. It is. It's definitely based on a true story, and I think a lot of the characters are definitely based on people that I know. Actually, all of them are. Even the bad ones. Yeah.
So that makes me think, like, in terms of the teacher and the school and stuff in the book, is that been some of your kind of experience as well?
Yes, Mrs. Mobley, or what, Mrs. Wobbly? Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say that some of the experiences that I've had, I've had, that kind of racism. And I think for a lot of Māori students as well, we do experience that racism. But at the same time, I did want to balance it out with the librarian, Miss Martin, who was like the nicest, like all librarians are. She's such a beautiful ally to Nico, and so I really wanted to balance that out as well. Is that with everything there is bad, but there's also good too. So yeah.
Awesome. Do you want to talk?
One of the things that we've been discussing, these girls are in the, we get together every week to talk about writing, and they just come at their lunchtime. And one of the things we've been discussing is how to avoid writing a stereotype. Did you have, you're basing it on people you know as well, so that's an extra kind of challenge there with the layer. So how do you deal with that kind of an issue, or is it not a problem for you?
Oh yeah, I did think about that question. I saw that in the email, and I did think about that. And I remember a quote from one of my favorite authors, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She talks about the danger of a single story. And what she says that the danger of a single story is that it's not that the stereotypes aren't true, but it's only one side of the story. And I think it's easy to write stereotypes when, for example, you're a non-Māori writing about a Māori character and you haven't had those experiences. So that's, you know what I mean? So for me, I feel like I'm able to write the Porangi Boy and the characters because they're characters that are like my auntie, my dad, you know, they're all based on like my uncles, my family. And so the characters aren't, if you look at the Porangi Boy and the characters, if you were to look on the outside, it could easily have become a stereotypical story because it's a Māori boy who hasn't, for example, got a dad who's not there. His mum isn't very present. You know, he doesn't grow up in a rich home. So that could easily be a stereotype for Māori, but because the character of Nico isn't just one-sided, it's not just those things that are happening to him. Those are things that are happening in the background. Mm. It's not the center focus of the story. And I think that's a way of avoiding those stereotypes too, is that we don't really understand what's happening to Nico's mum because it's not the focus of the story. You know, it could be for any reason why she's not present. It could be mental health. It could be drugs. We don't know. That's not the focus of the story. The focus is on Nico and his character and who he is. And it's sort of all those elements of what makes a person. And I think another thing too, I thought too, is the dialogue of characters too, because the Porangi Boy is full of dialogue. And when I read books, I sometimes feel like the dialogue is really robotic. And sometimes I read a book and I'm like, that person wouldn't say that in real life. You know, it sounds like it's very like robot-y. And when you read the dialogue on the Porangi Boy, I feel like it's very, very real and authentic. And I think those elements all add to making sure that we don't write to the stereotypes of a character, making sure they're not one-dimensional. And to end on that, I think also to write what you know. So if you like I said, if you are, you know, like a Pākehā person writing about a Māori story, it's something that you probably don't know, so we probably should stay away from that. But if you have had experiences, for example, maybe you've gone through, maybe you've had someone in your family die, or something like that, you've experienced grief, you can write about those experiences, you can write about what you know, and I think that makes it authentic. Mm. Yeah.
Interesting you bring up dialogue. When Joy looked at your book, that was the first thing she commented on. She was like, the dialogue. Do you want to say anything about that?
Oh, sorry, I can't hear.
Write like books and stories in the past. Can you hear? Or
sorry, I can't hear. You might have to come closer to the mic.
Loud.
Oh yeah, scream it.
So in the past, right, like books and stuff, and I was like, it can never make the dialogue like realistic. It just sounds so awful. Then I just opened your book, it just ran a page, and I was like, it sounds like an actual conversation. I was like, I was wondering if you had any like if you're writing about like maybe a fantasy novel or something that like obviously like magic dragons or whatever, but like how would you write that as a like realistic dialogue.
Okay, it was kind of hard to hear the end of your question, but I heard something about dragons.
She's wanting to know how you write realistic dialogue.
How do you write realistic dialogue?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So there's two things. Thank you for your question. There's two things. The first thing is I like to listen to how people talk all the time. And so if you listen to conversations of people, and especially because I'm not 12, so it's like if I was to write my dialogue, it would sound different to how Nico and Y speak to each other. But when I listen to 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds, and especially Māori kids from up north, it's the way that they speak. So sometimes I hear them speak and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's such a good one. I write it down. And so you can listen to people and hear and how they speak. And the second one is when I'm writing, I talk to myself, and it might sound weird. And if people saw me, they'd probably think I was really weird. But it's it's a good way, because if you speak it out and you're talking to yourself in conversation, then it can help you to make it seem like it's very authentic or real. You know, because if you write words on a paper, it might sound different when you speak it out. Yeah. And also, often I'll just have conversations with myself and, oh yeah, that sounds good, and then I write it down. Does that help answer your question, Joy?
Yeah, because I was like, usually, be louder. Usually I write like fantasy novels, so like, or like novels, just like I have experience them, so that helps me.
I think you might need to pull the mic over to you, Joy, because I can't hear you, and I really, really want to hear what you're saying.
Very interesting that you
Stand over here.
Yeah, that's way better. I can hear you now. Yay.
So I was like, I like to write like fantasy stuff, so I haven't personally experienced it, like obviously, but that probably make it easier if I'm trying to like use other conversations or like talk to myself like I'm the characters. But yeah.
Oh, cool. So if you're writing fantasy, I feel like it's still the same, because even if you haven't experienced it, the main character in your story, are they, you know, like they would they still have a human voice, or?
I don't know. It's yeah, but
well,
Yeah.
if you can't go and like hear people, like, you know, because if your characters might be aliens or something, I don't know, but you can still try imagining yourself being the character, and then just talking out loud how you want that character to sound like, or what kind of character you want them to be, and then just speak it out loud, and then I think it will happen over time constantly, where the character becomes a real person in your head. And you can hear them, because that's what happened to me with Nico and Y. I would be like driving and I could hear them speaking in my head. And I'm like, oh, this is something that Nico would say, or this is something that Y would say, and I would like write it down on my phone, things like that. So yeah, cool.
One of the things I wanted to know about, just back to me, was the structure. While we're speaking to who's talking, because I noticed you had now and after, and maybe then, and then it kind of disappeared off towards the end of the novel. You didn't even put the time in. Did that structure come to you at the beginning, or was it something that you worked on and ended up with?
It's something that I just ended up with, actually, because I'd finished the draft, and it was just structured from beginning to end, you know, like a normal book, I guess, or a regular book. But when I was reading it over, I thought it just didn't feel like there was enough momentum, or it wasn't leading up to it. I don't know, I just felt a little bit flat. And then I thought, what if it was centered around, you know, the death of Koro, and it was before, after, and I just kind of played around with it pretty much, and then tested it out, read it, and I was like, oh, I like this. And that's pretty much how it happened. And then I had a mentor at the time, and I sent it to her and I said, does this work? Because I thought it would just be something different and make it a bit more exciting. And she said, yeah, it works.
Because it's a pivotal part of his life, isn't it? And so you've got that momentum as to what's going to happen to him, and then you find out what happens. And so it was interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of be like, a page turner. And then we're going from, and I thought, is that going to be confusing for kids? And maybe like for some it is, but yeah, I thought it worked.
Nice challenge for them. Anyone?
Yeah.
Question.
Louder.
Joy, louder. Speak louder. I have a question. So, I struggle with motivation.
I'm gonna you gotta put the mic closer to you, Joy. Yeah.
I struggle with motivation with writing and like everything else. I have habits of like joining things and then quitting like a week later. So I just wanted to know how you like committed and like wrote an entire book. Like what's your like motivation?
Oh, that's such a nice question. Well, that's a good question actually, because this year I haven't been very motivated to finish my second book. So, but I would say, well, the motivation is, I think when you have the story and you know it's a good story, when you can't stop thinking about it. And for me, I couldn't stop thinking about the protests that happened up north, and I couldn't stop thinking about Nico, the character, and it just kept like coming in, and it was almost like, when you eat something and you like want to vomit it out. It's like the story was in my head, and I just like, I needed to get it out. Otherwise it was just going to like make me feel like sick. So that's the first thing, is like, that's how I knew that I had the story. And that was my motivation. I think also I was thinking about why the story was important and why it needed to be written. I thought about all the kids that were like me, that were looking for stories that they could relate to, and that kind of inspired me to get up every day and write, because I was also working full-time as well. So it was hard to juggle full-time work and writing as well, because I'm tired when I get home. I want to sleep and eat, and I want to be lazy. But I just think it's just remembering why you started and why you love writing, because I didn't know what could happen with the Porangi Boy. I didn't even know if it would get published. I didn't even know if, to be nominated for the Book Awards is amazing. I was like, wow, I had no idea when I was writing it. I would write it at different times, in the mornings at like 3 a.m., just whenever I had time, usually like when I'm alone, eating ice cream, but because it's really lonely, writing. But to answer your question, I think it's just to remember why you started, why you love writing, and why your story is important and why it needs to be written. And no matter the outcome, if it gets published or well, at least, you did it and you gave it everything. So, yeah.
I love that. I think this was definitely a story that needed to be told, and you can tell already how many people were excited about it when it came out. And did I read that it reprinted after 6 weeks after the first publishing run? That's awesome.
It's had a few reprints now, which I think it's had 3. I'm not actually sure. Which for me is amazing, because I've always dreamed about being a writer since I was little, and so it's amazing that I'm even doing this Zoom right now and talking to you guys about this, because I always imagined that I would be a writer, but to actually live my dream is beyond beyond happiness. It's amazing, and just really grateful.
So is there another book being written? What?
This year I'm really focused on learning te reo Māori. It's like my big focus this year, but I have started writing a second book as well, but this is more of a young adult book. So how old are you two?
13.
Oh, 13 and 13. So Maybe by the time it comes out, you'll be old enough.
They read a lot in our life.
But yeah, no, I'm definitely working on another book, and it's about Black Lives Matter protests in Auckland and how it relates to what's happening over in New Zealand and the connection between New Zealand and America, and based on the lives of 3 young adults who were among the protests here. And it's about identity and belonging and all those things, which I love. I'm really passionate about writing about those topics. So yeah, I have a question. Can I ask a question? It's Joy and Karina. So I was inspired to write the Porangi Boy because there wasn't a story for me because I wanted to write a story that hadn't been written before. So what's a story idea that you both have, or what are you working on, or what's a story that you really want to write about?
This is a lot of pressure.
No pressure.
that really helps relieve.
That's right, Joy. Loud.
Joy, be loud.
Okay, Joy first.
Oh no.
Rita started writing a book, but it was like not a great topic. She was writing it with her friends. She got like 8 pages in, like 100 pages. It was epic, right? But then I'm like, I sort of like jump from thing to thing, and so I'm trying to find right now just a topic that will like keep me excited throughout. Like I probably won't be able to write a book, but just anything that will make me like want to write. Like I really want to write the story, and so like then I'll write the story, and I won't like drop out halfway. But I remember I was in, I think at my old school, I wrote a story and I really enjoyed it. And then it like, I got, I think a first place award in some competition or something. So it's like, and then every time I force myself to write, it just sucks. So I'm trying to find something that makes me excited so that I can actually like write something that's like decent, you know? Because if I just force myself to write something that I'm not excited about, it doesn't turn out well. So yeah, you probably something that's like, if I was gonna do a topic like, I don't know, like sci-fi or something.
Yeah, I think definitely the thing about not knowing what story to like land on. There are a lot of ideas in my head. Not many of them are good. Some of them are. But it's just, I think, finding, the one that gives me motivation. I'm sort of just jumping from thing to thing. It's not really like anything like set in stone or anything. Even that one that Joy talked about, not something that I enjoyed writing about. So I had motivation for like 50 pages and then just forced myself to write. And that's when it sort of...
Oh, okay. So that's why you asked the motivation question. How do you well, that's a good point. You do have to be excited about your story, but there are times when you do feel like you feel deflated a bit and you're like, and that actually happens to a lot of writers, I think. And I'm trying to think if it happened to me during Porangi Boy. I think maybe there were times when I was like, the story's going nowhere, but you just have to try and look for inspiration and spark that story back up. Maybe you have like a different like side plot or something, or like maybe like another character or something will happen to the character or something like that, and it will bring the story back alive.
Yeah,
but keep going.
I have another question. I need to talk really loud. It's sort of like 2 questions in one. Like I was reading, I think it was John Green or something, and he had every character had some like cool like hobby or something like that made them like different from everyone else, and was just wondering how you do your research and how you like pick different like characteristics.
Like giving them personalities.
Yeah, like every character I write, I don't understand how writers like they'll pick like they'll pick like a hobby or something for the character, and they're all different and it's really cool. But I just wondering how you do that.
Okay, good question. So how do I make the characters like with their hobbies and all that? Well, one thing I thought about was like when I like watched kids from up north and observed them, and I thought about myself when I was young. A hobby was eating. Which is true, right? Like when you think about in a book and there's like we're watching the characters and I'm always like, when do they eat? Because there's like a lot of talking and like there's a lot of going on, but when do they eat? And sometimes you can really tell a character like their favorite food, things like that. And so I put a lot of food in the Porangi Boy, and with Nico, like he doesn't like salt and vinegar chips because of the smell. But and so like he like it's always like food. But that's like one hobby that I thought of. I'm trying to think of like other hobbies. I think the characteristics though that you're talking about is I really wanted Nico and the Porangi Boy to be really kind and empathetic, and to show that instead of telling it though, I wanted to show that. And I think I did that through the way that he looks after his grandfather and the way that he looks after his little cousin. And so if you look at the cover of the book, he doesn't seem like that type of person to do that. And maybe that's not a hobby, but it's a characteristic of him that I really wanted to show in the book. So
Did you have a say on the cover or not? I know some publishers, they let you have a say and others they don't, but did you get any influence into what the cover would look like?
yeah, I had 4 options of 4 different covers, and the other 3 were really nice. But when I looked at this cover, got it right here, I was like, oh, you guys got one too. I was kind of like, oh, and it kind of shocked me a bit. So it's like a Māori boy with a hood, right? And I wasn't too sure because I wasn't sure if that would sell, if I'm being honest. But my mum works up north at a school called Mōrewa, which is a Decile 1 all Māori school, and she showed all 4 covers to the kids. But every one of them said this. And
Interesting.
one of the boys put their hand up and was like, that one because he looks like me. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I chose that one. So, yeah, I love the cupboards. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, it's really impactful, which is good. In terms of the characters and stuff, do you do a lot of planning, and like do you actually write and go, this is everything about that character before you start writing, or during? How does that work in terms of plotting them out?
Yeah, I did actually. For the Porangi Boy, I put the main characters, Nico, Koro, Wai, Uncle Elliot, Tu, and I wrote all of their characteristics. Tu is a bully and he's mean, and Nico is kind, and Wai is funny and charismatic. So when I put all of those onto my my plan, it's easy to refer to that when I'm writing the book, because if the character doesn't act in character, it's a bit weird, and it helps keep it consistent. Or if I reread something that I've read and is that something that Nico would say? Is that something that Wai would actually do? Or is that just random? Or is that Shilo? So yeah, it's really good, I think, to plan out actually the characters and all of the attributes that you want them to have. And it's always good to keep in mind to a person that reminds you of them, or even it could be a couple of people that remind you of each of the character, to put them in there to their name, so that when you think of the character, you think of that person and their characteristics. And every character in the book is someone that I know, and it's so funny.
So I need to go back to this because I find this fascinating. Have you got any flack from anyone that has read it and seen themselves or not cared for the way that they've been portrayed or questioned you?
Yeah, one of my aunties questioned me. She said, "Hey, is that Auntie Rangi is that about me? Or is that about Auntie Janice?" And I was like, "Oh." And I was like, "Oh, the good parts are about you, Auntie." And she's like,
Nice.
I thought so. So, yeah, I mean, that's one example of that. It's more my family are all really curious. And in terms of like the not so nice characters, they haven't reached out or anything. They're probably really oblivious. Sometimes we're quite oblivious to our own character. So they probably have no idea. They probably read it and thought, oh, he's not a very nice person. Yeah.
So when did you first let someone read it? Your early drafts. Are you one of these people who keeps it to themselves until it's finished, or do you share as you go?
Well, I shared my first draft with my mum.
So you wrote all the way through until you've actually shared one?
Yeah. Oh, it was a really bad draft. I was all over the place. But I gave it to my mum to read, and she said that it was really good, but mum's a bias. So, but she said it was really good, and she said she cried during the sad parts, and she started reading a little bit to her kids at school to test it out a bit. I don't know if you're even allowed to do that, but she did that. And she said that it got really good reaction. So I was like, cool. So, yeah, it was mostly my close family that I let read. And that's it. I'd be too scared to let anyone else read it until it was really polished and really good. Yeah.
Any more questions?
It's given me so much to think about, and I'm really quite terrified now, being surrounded by writers.
Oh yeah.
Where that's going to go. Anything else there any other questions, girls?
No.
Okay, Te Pai, I think time might be up. Yeah.
We do well.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing, and being so open with your answers. It really has been really fascinating and eye-opening to learn so much more.
Oh,
And I am really excited about your next book.
I know.
As well.
So we'll read that now.
Oh, you're so welcome. Ngā mihi kia koutou. Thank you, all of you, for being here. It's been, a privilege. So thank you so much. And thank you for reading the Porangi Boy as well. And good luck with your writing. Cut a few. Keep going. Haere tonu. Keep writing. Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.